The luckiest people who survived the impossible. What if I told you some people have faced death head-on, yet somehow they survived? Not just any survival stories, but situations so extreme, so unbelievable, that they defy logic itself. Imagine sinking 300 feet underwater with no oxygen, being stranded in the Arctic with nothing but your bare hands, or surviving a plane crash in the Andes, only to face starvation and freezing temperatures for 72 days. These people weren't just lucky. They endured the unthinkable, fought through every odd, and emerged alive. But how did they do it? What makes a person able to withstand the impossible? Is it sheer willpower, superhuman endurance, or something else entirely? Let's dive into the most mind-blowing survival stories ever recorded, where logic says they shouldn't have made it, but they did. How long do you think you could hold your breath? A minute? Maybe two? Chris Lemons, a commercial deep-sea diver, didn't have a choice. He was 300 feet underwater when his lifeline was cut off. A deep-sea diver's umbilical cord supplies everything they need to survive. If it's severed, it's game over. That's exactly what happened to Chris. The ocean around him was pitch black, the water freezing cold, and he had only a few minutes of oxygen left in his suit. His dive team scrambled to find him, but it took them over half an hour. When they finally reached his lifeless body, they thought it was too late. But he wasn't dead. Somehow his body had gone into a state of hibernation, slowing his oxygen use to almost nothing. Medical experts are still baffled. He should have died. Instead, Chris Lemons woke up, fully recovered, and went back to deep-sea diving like nothing ever happened. What if you were left alone in the Arctic, with no experience, no supplies, and no way out? That's exactly what happened to Ada Blackjack, a young Inupiaq woman who joined a 1921 expedition to Wrangel Island as a cook. She wasn't a survivalist. She wasn't an explorer. She was just a mother trying to make money to save her sick son. But the Arctic doesn't care. The expedition turned into a nightmare. Supplies ran out, food was scarce, and the brutal cold was unforgiving. The men she traveled with left to find help and never returned. Ada was completely alone. For 2 years, she fought against starvation, extreme cold, and relentless polar bears. She had to teach herself how to hunt, build shelters, and stay alive, skills she had never been taught. Finally, after 2 freezing, grueling years, a rescue team arrived. But they didn't find a helpless woman. They found a warrior, a survivor who had done the impossible. Ada walked into the Arctic as a cook. She walked out as one of the toughest survivors in history. Maurice and Marilyn Bailey, 117 days lost at sea. What would you do if your boat was smashed apart by a whale in the middle of the ocean, and you were left drifting in a tiny raft with no food or water? That's what happened to Maurice and Marilyn Bailey in 1973. They set sail for a new life, but fate had other plans. A massive whale rammed their boat, sinking it almost instantly. They had nothing but a tiny life raft and a handful of supplies. They thought rescue would come, but days passed, then weeks, then months. Their supplies ran out. No food, no fresh water, nothing. To survive, they had to drink rainwater and eat raw fish and turtles, sometimes drinking the blood of seabirds just to stay hydrated. Sharks circled their tiny raft, storms battered them, and the scorching sun burned their skin to the bone. By the time a fishing boat finally spotted them, they had survived 117 days at sea. They were starved, sunburned, and barely alive. Most people wouldn't have lasted a week. They lasted nearly 4 months. Joe Simpson, the man who crawled down a mountain. If you broke your leg on a 21,000-foot mountain, you'd be dead, right? Not Joe Simpson. In 1985, he and his climbing partner Simon Yates were scaling Ciula Grande in Peru when disaster struck. Joe fell, shattering his leg. With no way to get him down, Simon tried lowering him with a rope, but then came the ultimate nightmare. Joe slipped over a cliff edge, hanging in midair. Simon had to make an impossible choice. Keep holding on, and they both fall. Cut the rope, and let Joe die. He cut the rope. Joe plummeted 100 feet into a deep crevasse. Simon, convinced he was dead, left the mountain. But Joe wasn't dead. With a broken leg and no food, he dragged himself for 3 days, inch by inch, through freezing, brutal terrain, until he miraculously reached camp. Just as Simon was about to leave, Joe appeared, alive. The miracle of the Andes, 72 days in hell. A plane crashes in the Andes Mountains. 45 people on board. No food, no warmth, no hope. This was Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 in 1972. A rugby team and their friends were flying to Chile when their plane slammed into a glacier. Only a handful of passengers survived the initial crash. Then came the real nightmare. Temperatures dropped to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Starvation set in. Avalanches buried survivors alive. After 8 days, rescue teams gave up. The world believed they were all dead. Faced with no other choice, the survivors did the unthinkable. They ate the bodies of their dead friends to stay alive. After 72 days of pure hell, 2 survivors, Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, hiked for 10 days through the mountains, finally finding help. Their journey led to the rescue of 16 survivors. A story so unbelievable, it became one of the most famous survival tales in history. Louis Zamperini, 47 days at sea and years of torture. Louis Zamperini was an Olympic athlete, a war hero, and a man who refused to break. In 1943, his bomber plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean. He drifted for 47 days in a raft, battling sharks circling his tiny boat, starvation and dehydration, blistering sunburn. Then, just as he thought he was saved, he was captured by the Japanese and sent to a brutal POW camp. For 2 years he was beaten daily, starved, tortured relentlessly. Yet he never gave up. He survived. He came home. And despite everything, he forgave his captors. His story became the best-selling book Unbroken, proving that true survival isn't just staying alive. It's what you do after. These stories prove one thing. When the odds are against you, the will to survive is stronger than anything. Want more incredible survival stories? Subscribe and tell us in the comments.